earlier this year, I mentioned this deck, Circo Tarot, as one of my top 5 decks. I also mentioned that this is one of my favorite decks because this is the first deck which allows me to read with an intuitive flow that I've struggled to capture before. Partially because of the style of this deck, which I really, really like. That sort of bold, sort of naive style art. And partially, now that I think about it, it could have benefited from the priming effect of the Tarot of Delphi, who came just before this deck and who I work with just before I work with this deck. So either way, I think this is a great deck, and I was going to review it when this one here, the first edition, became out of print. As a rule, I do not review out of print decks for various reasons that I've spoken about already in my other videos. And then the second edition came. The second edition was one without the border at the back, because a lot of people feel that the border doesn't, it's bordered at the back and then it's borderless at the front, so it's a bit, in any case, so when this came, I was going to review this, and then this one became out of print as well, and so I didn't review that for that reason. First of all, I quite like this art, and it's not for everyone, but it is very charming. It's really easy to read with. It's bright, but without hiding the necessary darkness of the things that we have to confront. The cardstock is high sheen, what I would call high sheen. It's not glossy. I would say glossy when they're sticky, like a lot of Schiffer's deck, like the Mary L, like the Cook's Tarot. They're really sticky. This one you can slip, it shuffles quite beautifully. It does capture a bit of your fingerprints, but you just have to rub it off. But it does, so if you just moisturize your hand, for example, is best to make sure that your moisturizer's rubbed in deeply into your skin before you handle this deck. And so the second edition, because the back is borderless, initially I thought, okay, so the first edition feels fluffier to me. It is generally a fluffier deck anyway. It's thicker than the average deck, which I like, but at the same time it also feels airy, as if there's this micro particle of air in between the cards and inside the cardstock itself. Now, people say that she is drawn after the actress Rose McGowan. I personally don't recognize her here, even after I've been told, but some people are put off by this deck because of that. And so yeah, so it's a fluffy deck, and when I received the second edition with the borderless back, I actually think that it felt more dense just by a tiny fraction, and it felt less fluffy. Okay, I've damaged that already, which is a real bummer, And so initially I thought it's probably a placebo effect, because visually it looks a certain way, and so therefore is an illusion in the fingertips. But then I also thought that maybe it is less fluffy because in the back the ink goes all the way to the edges, while and for whatever reason that create a fraction of a micro fraction more feeling of density throughout the deck as an accumulative effect. Who knows? But that's really minute. When you shuffle this, it just shuffles really, really beautifully. Yeah, so we've gone through that. So this is the first edition, which is no longer available. So it also it bends a little bit, and I suspect it's because the borderless side of the card might be contracting in a different rate than the back of the card, which doesn't have ink all the way to the edges. But it's so minute, the curve is so slight that it doesn't really matter. And I personally actually rather like the fluffiness of this deck. It's just so fluffy. It feels really light. Even though it's thick, it's so light. And you know there are some decks that are thin, but when you touch it, it feels like a block of wood. And I like that as well, actually. Like the Tarot of Delphi is really, really crisp. It's almost as if it feels when you're shuffling, it feels like you're shuffling very, very thin pieces of wood, almost that kind of crunchy, crispy feel. Like some of the older Baba Studios cardstock. This is fluffy. It's smooth to shuffle, high sheen. It's not sticky. It's smooth against each other, but it's not too slippery. So it's wonderful. The art's wonderful. The only thing about our desire and appetite for borderless deck is that with this deck, I noticed that with borderless cards, you see the chipping a lot more. The chipping becomes more visible, consequently, but we can't have it all in life, can we? So if you don't want chips to be visible, then you have to have borders. If you don't want borders, you have to live with the fact that once you shuffle this and wear and tear like anything material on this earth, they'll chip. Now I've damaged this, so that's not chipping, that's not wear and tear, that's just a very bad accident. But if you can imagine, if that's white, it won't look as obvious. But that's not an option anymore, so I'm going to put that aside. And also, I believe the Kickstarter edition is going to be the same as the second edition, which has a red version of that and a red string like that instead of the blue. And I bought this $50 US plus $15 shipping to New Zealand, which is one of the cheapest shipping from the US I've ever had. So I'm not complaining. I'm actually quite delighted. So that is the Circo Tarot, and I think it is worth the funding that it deserves, and it's worth supporting as a campaign. It is a really good deck, and she's quite a good artist. I think I like her artwork. She has a website, and she designed greeting cards and such, and so is a perfect combination between that skill and her passion for tarot. So yeah, so that's the Circo Tarot. So there it is, the Circo Tarot. Bye.